You know what's really interesting? When I saw the title of this, which the agenda was, what's the holdup? And then I thought, well, the real question is, what have you all been doing for us? And I thought of that. I think it's Tina Turner, what have you been doing for me right now? I tried to get that clip, but I figured it couldn't complete with the Good Morning clip that Carl runs, which gets us in the right mood. So the real question is, in my mind, well, actually, there's two questions. One is, what is the holdup? We had some really bad, tragic incidents occur. And a lot of smart people came together and said, PHMSA, you need to make a lot of changes. And they gave us a laundry list of things to do. And, here we are several years later, and as Carl mentioned, there's rulemakings that haven't gone out. And there's a sense of frustration, not just from the public, not just from, in some cases, the industry, but also internally, because we have a lot of things that we need to achieve. When we know what we want to do, we have to go through the process. Now, some smart minds some time ago set in place a regulatory process that is agonizingly slow. And they probably did it for good reason. Probably to keep some trigger-happy regulator from coming up with what they thought was a good idea and just steamrolling folks. The process, as Cynthia mentioned, is slow. It allows for many opportunities for public input and course correction. So hopefully you end up with a good outcome. But what comfort does that give to someone who lost a family member? If you had someone injured in one of those bad accidents, and you say, well, gee, it's been how many years? Nobody's doing anything. Well, the fact of the matter is a lot of work has been done. I want to talk about that. But I also want to re-emphasize something that Cynthia said. I always get up here and whine about resources, and I'll take the opportunity to do so again. Look around you. Look in the room. Get an idea for how many people are in here. Carl, I think you said there was about 177 people here. I want you to realize 3/4 of this number are how many inspectors we have to inspect across the country at the federal level. Now, there's a lot of state inspectors. We don't have a whole lot of people. And we have probably about 50 people that work on rulemaking and some of the things I'm going to talk about. We've done a lot. And I'm proud of what we've done. I want to showcase this. So let's see if I can. We had 42 congressional mandates. It's just a number. Some of them were easy. Some of them were pretty tough. Some of them relate to rulemaking, and I'll go through these. But some of them were things that we could do within our current authority without doing rulemaking. We've already completed 20 of the 42. And I'll show you this list. We were on track to get 17 more done within the time frame that Congress gave to us. And we've got 5 that, folks, we just missed the date, or we're not going to make the date. They're pretty tough situations, and I'll talk about that. And later I'm going to run through this list. It'd be agonizing if I went through every one of these, so I'm only going to hit some of them. But on top of this, we have NTSB recommendations. Our friends over there gave us a lot of things to do. And we've got GAO recommendations and IG recommendations. And so we've got a whole lot on our plate. And so you hear me talking about we've just got so much to do and too little people. But what does that mean when it comes to safety? What does that mean to the people who are waiting for safety improvements? So, we have a process to go through regulatory development, but we also have other ways that we can move towards safety. Where we couldn't issue a rulemaking, you know what we did? We issued an advisory bulletin. It doesn't have the weight of law, and an advisory bulletin never imposes new requirements, but it does say, hey folks, heads up. If you're not complying with the rule as it is, you better. I want to reemphasize that. And by the way, this is how we're interpreting this provision. We have to use other tools. Cynthia mentioned that we're using media sites. We're using public meetings. We're using every way we can to get those safety improvements in place, because I certainly don't want to get a phone call that another incident has happened. I don't want to be speaking to you all next year about another horrible event. I don't want those phone calls. It's very difficult to get up here and explain why bad things happen if we haven't taken action or we haven't been able to. So we have been taking a lot of action to address things. And I'm going to show you my little chart here. And Carl, you do make these available to your attendees, right? Oops, did I just get up too? This chart, you can also see a version of this chart on our website, and everybody's squinting. Peter, I see you squinting. Does that mean you can't read that? You got crappy. Well, we'll make this available. The key point, you can't read all of these, and I don't expect people do. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll through these. This is just a list of congressional mandates, and then I'll come back and go through them a little bit slower and stop on some important ones, some very important ones. The green, the dark green, let me point out the dark green at the very top are the ones that we're done. We completed, done, check marked. The ones that are the pale green, those are the ones of we're making good progress. We think we're going to meet the deadline either by the date or before, and the yellow ones are the ones we either miss the date or we will likely miss the date. And I want to make sure I talk about those. So I'm just going to scroll through those real quickly to give you an idea of the number, and I want you to pay attention to how many of these are green and how many are yellow. Okay? Get the general idea we've been working? Okay. So let me go back and talk about these. I'll tell you the next slide is NTSB recommendations, but we won't go there yet. We'll go back and let's talk about the congressional mandates. Let me go back up to the top real quick. There are some really challenging issues that we have. Some things that Congress told us to do that, I'm going back up to section 2. Do you have a pointer up here, Carl? No pointer?
Let me get it.
Oh, well, let me go ahead. So some of the congressional mandates were pretty simple and straightforward, and so we just charged ahead to go ahead and do it. Simple things like the very first one I'll use as an example. PHMSA should update Part 190 to be consistent with new penalties. Yeah, we like those new penalty provisions. They upped our amount of civil penalties. Those are just going into rule. Matter of fact, we have a final rule. It's done. We have the authority to use it, and we are. Simple, straightforward. Now, is that not the wimpiest pointer you have ever seen?
PHMSA gave it to me.
Yeah, well, maybe there was a reason for it. I think it's a great pointer. So I want to talk to you a moment. The green stars, by the way, those are reminders to me to make sure I talk to you all about these. Automatic and remotely controlled shut-off valves. That's an important, very important issue. We did a study. Congress had given us a date of January 3rd, 2014 to require the use. When they say require, that means regulation. They said, we want you to issue a regulation to require those valves. Good idea. But where do we require those valves to be placed? How many are too many? What kind of valves should be placed where? You know, I once had a discussion with someone who was less informed, of a political nature. I'm being tactful here. It wasn't anybody in PHMSA, by the way. And they said, well, you need to require valves like every 50 feet. And I said, the analogy I gave them is I said, look, you got to consider a pipeline kind of like this really large garden hose. You know, it's a simplistic example. But I said, what happens in your garden hose when you connect a bunch of garden hoses? You have all those little valves, you screw them together. Has anyone here in this room connected garden hoses and not had one leak? You know, where they shoot out the water, you're screwing it together and you get splashed? Okay, that happens to me. Okay, pipelines don't leak like that. But the point is, when you introduce too many valves, you're actually introducing risks. You've got to have enough valves to be able to shut off the pipeline if something bad happens, to respond appropriately, to limit release if something bad happens. But you don't want to go so far that you actually introduce problems. So it's not a real simple answer. It seems like it would be. We did a study, we contracted a study, had smarter minds than ours look at these issues. And we sent a report to Congress with some, just the results of the study. But that wasn't really enough, because you know what this is connected to? It's not just about valves. Why did Congress put that one in the reauthorization? It wasn't just because they said, hey, let's require more valves. No, there were bad accidents, and they said there weren't enough valves. There was a reason why. So we went back and we thought about why was the mandate in there, what's the purpose of the valves, and it actually is connected to, I'm scrolling down here. Oh, just went over it. This one, leak detection. What it has to do with is an operator's response to an incident. How soon do they detect a leak? And how quickly are they able to isolate the section or respond in some appropriate manner? The leak detection, we also contracted out a leak detection. Now, Congress did say do a study on leak detection systems, which we did. They mandated that. We've completed. Hey, notice the bright green, another check mark for us. I like check marks. I like bright green. We did 2 studies. One on, well, we did more than 2, but specifically we did a study on leak detection and we did a study on valves. Those 2 are being paired together, the results of those studies, with a GAO audit. What was the GAO audit on? It was on operator response to incidents. So we have different pots of knowledge that are coming together to help us determine how we should go forward with rulemaking. So, with the leak detection and the next requirement, if appropriate, issue regulations requiring leak detection, we're doing that too. Notice I put my star here. But we're putting it together as a package. So valves and leak detection are in the works. I do want to thank Carl for flashing up the website. That OST, it's a public-facing website that can tell you where our rules are. We have produced a lot of rules covering a lot of these items. We have got them to the point where we're done with them basically and it's in someone else's hands. But that's not enough. And in many cases, we are going to take action. If we feel the rulemaking process isn't moving quick enough, we're going to issue safety advisories or we're going to try to get at it from another route. So we are not meeting this deadline. I had to tell Congressman's staffers yesterday, they were holding us accountable and saying, where are you? They do that. Matter of fact, we've had to do that several times. Just quickly, just so you know, accountability. Me standing up here is Carl and the PST holding PHMSA accountable. And that's okay, and it needs to be done. So thank you. It's not very comfortable standing up here sometimes, but it needs to be done. So let me also tell you about the accountability that we have, just general information. Every week, Jeff Weiss, my boss, and Alan and I meet to discuss our progress on things like this. Every Tuesday, we have a standing meeting. Every other week, Jeff has to report to Cynthia where we are on every one of these things. We've been doing this now for how many years, Alan? Yeah, since well, actually we started before reauthorization, but after reauthorization it kind of centered around these. Every month, Cynthia has to report to the Deputy Secretary of Transportation where we are on rulemaking to address these items. So there is clear lines of accountability, and trust me, when we don't make a motion, if we aren't meeting, I don't like having to explain why we're not meeting these dates. But we are. We're meeting all but 5, so I'm going to keep moving on here. So, one that's very important, I want to talk to you about cast iron pipe, and I think Carl and Cynthia mentioned cast iron pipelines. Congress said, you need to do a survey of existing cast iron. We know this stuff can be problematic, and find out, where it exists and how quickly we're getting it out of the ground. So we went a step further. We actually created an online data set that you can go in and find out how much cast iron is in your state. You can find out how much a particular operator has, and you can also see a trend line of how quickly they're getting it out. It's accessible to anybody. So you can find out where additional efforts need to be taken to maybe speed up some of those replacement programs. Unintended consequences. This one's a real simple one, right? It's very simple. Let me read it to you for those. I had no idea that Carl would have such a small screen that people in the back couldn't see it. No. He just smiled at that one. He didn't even say anything. Okay, here's the requirement. It says, revise the regulations to require telephonic reporting no later than 1 hour following confirmed discovery and require revision of initial telephonic report after 48 hours if practicable. Our current regulations say operators must report incidents at the earliest practical moment, and through our enforcement history, we have generally set a precedent that we would expect that would be 2 hours or less, barring extenuating circumstances. So when Congress, in their mind, said, hey, that's too long, we want to get a firm, definite, prescriptive time frame. It's a great idea. Unintended consequences. Makes sense. We initiate a rulemaking to say, you must report incidents no later than 1 hour. Change from earliest practical moment to 1 hour. Sounds simple, right? What happened? What's confirmed discovery? Congress introduced new language. So now we have to figure out what confirmed discovery is. So if an operator is sitting in a SCADA control center and they see a pressure drop on a line, is that a confirmed discovery? If they send someone out to the site and you got a bunch of lines there and they see something on the ground, maybe it's a liquid line, and is that confirmed discovery? One of those lines are leaking. Is it from their line? Do they know? Is it confirmed discovery? If they spend the next 4 hours digging the pipe up to see the hole that the liquid's coming out of, is that confirmed discovery? So you see that huge timeline just evolved? The intent was, make those reports come in sooner. Make it a 1 hour. But now we're stuck with the confirmed discovery and defining what that is. The intent was good. Issuing the regulation to meet the requirement is a little bit more challenging. So what we did, and this is something people have alluded to, when the rulemaking process is too long or too complex, we use other opportunities. We issued an advisory bulletin to try to clarify and let people know that the regs would be changed to the 1 hour reporting, but they should definitely report it at the earliest practical moment. I'm probably way out of time, but I want to just hit two more things. 2 minutes. Oh, I got my 2-minute flash. Okay, so I'll be real quick. What keeps me up at night? Gathering lines. You know what? When Alan and I switched jobs, I was policy and programs, he was field operations. When we switched jobs, I became focused on field operations. That means that we get accident calls. And I start worrying about different kinds of things. This worries me as a regulator. Cast iron, integrity issues, operators can manage those risks. There are a whole lot of lines out there in Pennsylvania, ladies, that are not regulated. We have regulatory proposals to perhaps extend our current authority within what Congress has statutorily allowed us to do. Congress said, review and report to Congress on existing federal and state regulations for all gathering lines, existing exemptions, and the application of existing regulations to lines not presently regulated. They asked the right question. We have done the study. The concern is, I think the next one up here, it says, if appropriate, issue regulations subjecting offshore liquid gathering lines to the same standards. It didn't say all lines, but we may take some liberties there. Thing is, right now there's a whole lot of gathering lines out there that no one is inspecting. There are no safety standards applicable to those lines, and no safety agency or regulator is looking at them. Because the regulatory process is so slow, we have been pushing states, encouraging them, twisting arms where we can, to say, states, you're more agile than we are. Please take action please send somebody out there, because who inherits those lines after this initial boom in North Dakota and Pennsylvania and Texas? So those are lines that I'm worried about. Okay, I'm going to flip through these real quick. Time, done. Quick list. You never give me enough time, Carl. What I would say is look at this list. This just shows the different, here's the NTSB regulations. See the stars I'm not getting a chance to talk to? See how many of these are? We've got some OIG recommendations. And we've got GAO recommendations. Basically, we have a whole lot. Last thing I'll say, thank you very much for participating. We need your input. Cynthia said it, I would reinforce it. If we want to get good regulations and good regulatory schemes and improvements in safety, we need your help. We need your input. Thank you. Oh, SMS tomorrow, breakout. The jibber jabber. We will explain the jibber jabber. Maybe.